I've heard that the reason you called us all here is to assemble the best samurais.
This is a story about a man named Kenshin Himura set in 1878, the early Meiji era of Japanese history, but also a story about the man that Kenshin used to be, the deadly imperialist assassin Battousai the Manslayer. Rurouni Kenshin Meiji Swordman Romantic Story is one of my favorite anime. Also known as Wandering Samurai or Samurai X, it's a show I watched almost 17 years ago thanks to its run on Toonami.
I wasn't finished speaking.
Rurouni Kenshin premieres Monday, March 17th at 6:30. Only Toonami.
It's also one of my all-time favorite manga. While seemingly a simplistic shonen battle anime, Rurouni Kenshin is a multi-layered work steeped in real-world history and deep philosophical questioning about the nature of humanity, the effect of time, and the gray area between good and bad. Can a bad man do good things? Can a good man do bad things? Where is the line where someone becomes so rotten that they're irredeemable? These questions can not only be posed towards Kenshin, but ironically its creator Nobuhiro Watsuki, who for the last 2 years has been quietly reflecting on some pretty conflicting crimes he committed. Egregious mistakes can haunt not just a person's past, but their mind as well. Battousai the Manslayer seeks redemption, and the man who put pen to paper to create him does as well. But how much can you forgive? What does it take to forgive? How do we determine the penalty of past action? Kenshin has a conscience that never lets him forget the blood he spilled. What is true penance and what is true punishment? Can we expect someone to have a conscience? If we don't, are we not placing them in a hell of our own creation while they burn in a hell of their own? The Buddha said that life is suffering, and with that in mind, let's get into Rurouni Kenshin.
If you want to taste the ground, feel free to attack me.
Battousai the Manslayer. He is truly a man of legends.
We meet Kenshin in Tokyo in 1878. For the past 10 years, he's wandered Japan as a pacifist in order to atone for a life of violence and murder. He's a ronin, or swordsman without a master, and an ex-imperialist assassin of the Bakumatsu War. Now that's a lot of terminology which generally goes over the heads of casual viewers of the anime. The story of Kenshin is steeped in the history in which it takes place, the end of the Edo period of Japan and the beginning of the Meiji Restoration. Understanding this time period is key to understanding not only Kenshin, but the story itself. As a rule, Kenshin is sweet and soft-spoken, goofy and lovable. However, that is Kenshin, not Battousai the Manslayer. Like most socio-political renaissances, the Meiji era was not created through peace, and Battousai the Manslayer was not a man of peace. Kenshin was born around 1848, the winter years of the Edo period, which spanned from 1603 to 1868. This was a time of the shogunate, or bakufu, which are the same thing, as well as the samurai. For 200 years, Japan was ruled by the Tokugawa family, which is why history remembers them as the Tokugawa shogunate. A family of warlords, think mafia more than royals. The shogun were landowners and dictators. The samurai were a warrior class under the shogun, the muscle. Most of the battles Kenshin fights in the show are against ex-samurai and shogunate supporters. At the time, the Emperor of Japan had very little power and kind of just chilled in the capital, which was then Kyoto. But look, you could teach an entire college course on this subject, so I'll try to keep it brief and simple just for you. During the 200 years of the Edo period, Japan was isolated from the rest of the world. Things were divided by class. It was rigid, but it worked. Before the Tokugawa took over Japan, the country was at war for 150 years during what is now known as the Sengoku period. So in comparison, a little Edo classism was nice for a while. The country enjoyed the building of infrastructure, and for the first time, the people in the cities were able to relax, create, and educate themselves. Finally, peace was had for over 10 generations. Then in the middle of the 19th century, bam! America shows up and is like, hey, why don't you open your ports so we can fix our ships and maybe trade? And then obviously the Japanese were like, fuck you! So then America was like, well, we have dope new guns. And then they proceeded to show Japan what these new guns could do.
The devil's in charge here.
Hello, where can we find the person in charge?
Naturally, the ports were opened. However, this split the Japanese citizens between pro and anti-isolationism and made the shogunate look weak. The one thing Japan knew as a whole was that they could no longer protect their country from the United States or Europe. Something needed to change. The pro-isolationists wanted to restore the Japanese emperor to power and remove the weakened shogunate, so they ironically used the new weapons and tech from the Western world to seize control of the imperial palace and then the country in a bloodbath known as the Bakumatsu War. At the time, Kenshin Himura was 20 years old and the deadliest assassin of the imperialists. His role in the Bakumatsu War was to remove undesirables within the shogunate of their lives. He was a samurai dedicated to the cause of a new Japanese regime, Battousai the Manslayer. While his intentions were in the right place, his actions brought nothing but pain, something he pushed aside during the war in order to do his job. The Manslayer was fighting for a new Japan, a place without classism, ruled by democracy, headed by the rightful heir to their country, the emperor.
That night still sears my memory.
Are you certain that the Satsuma and Choshu clans have been forming an alliance?
I'm positive. Their hatred of the shogunate is well known.
However, in order to do that, he would have to help tear down a regime that unified Japan after 150 years of warfare and destroy the samurai class, leaving them with nothing, not even their pride. All of this would be done with the blade of his sword, his hands, and his hopes. It was a time of personal, physical, eye-to-eye combat. Taking a life with your own hands was far different from our projectile modern warfare. Battousai the Manslayer watched the light leave the eyes of the men he slew. When the war ended, so did Battousai the Manslayer. But the name and the deeds lived on. Kenshin laid down his katana and pledged never to kill again. Instead, he picked up a sakabato, a weapon of peace, a sword with a reversed blade, a sword created to protect, not to kill. A weapon for the new Meiji era. The city of Edo was changed to Tokyo, and the emperor left Kyoto to sit in the new eastern capital. Kenshin believed in the democracy that he helped set up, the new era of peace he fought to bring about, but was deeply scarred by the flames of war he bathed in as an adolescent. It's something that haunts his dreams and lingers in his mind at all times. Every step he takes is taken with the weight of his past on his shoulders. And for the next 10 years, he wandered alone as a ronin until fate forced him and a woman named Lady Kaoru together in the streets of Tokyo. She was finally someone to protect, to believe in, and eventually to love. Now, the effects of the Meiji era and the Bakumatsu War that brought it about are embodied in the cast of Rurouni Kenshin. Democracy and peace generally come at a heavy cost, and for Kenshin, it was the blood on his hands and his lack of purpose in place after the war. Lady Kaoru is an owner of a failing dojo. After the war, fighting was mostly over. Samurai were no more, and the new government banned swords. This ruined business for not only dojos, but sword makers as well. Yahiko is the orphan son of a samurai introduced as a street thief. Bitter and jaded, knowing that if his father's class wasn't dissolved, he would have lived a much better life. And Sanosuke, who eventually becomes Kenshin's best friend, hates the Meiji government Kenshin helped create. Sano was a member of the Sekihotai, a militant group who fought on the same side as Kenshin. As political extremists, they went about spreading the word of the new imperialist regime, including promises made by that new regime. Promises the Meiji government made but couldn't actually keep. The Sekihotai were then rounded up, called liars by the imperialists they aided in the Bakumatsu War, and put to death simply to cover the asses of the new government. This left Sanosuke completely alone with his anger, but together these four loners living with the after effects of a revolution eventually find themselves together with a lifelong bond of friendship, a bond that brings peace to Kenshin's soul. But is that too convenient? Is it right for a man who killed indiscriminately to find peace? This question is emphasized throughout the story as the ghosts of Kenshin's past continually show up to tempt him back to his murderous ways. Time and time again, he's met by people who exist to threaten the newfound stability of the Meiji era and the peace Kenshin has found with Lady Kaoru and his friends. His greatest desire is to maintain what he's found, but if he was to kill again, he knows he could never come back from it. He knows Kaoru could not look at him the same again, and he knows he could not be Kenshin any longer. His peace hinges on his ability to continue to suppress Battousai the Manslayer. It's important to remember that there are two sides to every story, and by all accounts, the Edo period was a time of flourish for Japan. The cities built around shogunate castles created an economic environment that allowed for new industry, and for the first time in the island's history, leisure and stable peace. It's even said that the literacy rate in Edo, now Tokyo, was around 80%, which is an astronomical level for a pre-industrial country. While shogunate rule was strict and sometimes unfair for the peasants and super unfair for the hookers and the butchers, as Buddhism stuff, it was stable and prosperous. The peace was torn to shreds by Kenshin and the revolutionaries who simply hoped that there would be a better future for everyone. People who supposedly fought to maintain isolationism but turned around and opened the borders the second the war ended in order to take advantage of Western thought and technology. Nobody on either side of this fight was necessarily right or wrong. Thousands died for idealism or protecting what had kept the country peaceful for 200 years. Despite scarring his soul to help the emperor gain back his power, the Kenshin we see in the show no longer wishes to be associated with that government, at least not as an employee. His time of killing in the name is over, but the ghosts of past choices still haunt Kenshin. Behind his happy eyes is still a trained killer, a tiger under the surface that laid waste to the shogunate with his own hands, removed people's sons, fathers, and friends from this earth before their time. His personalities mirrored the eras they belonged to, Battousai of the Bakumatsu War and the bloody end of the Edo period, and Kenshin of the Meiji era, the restoration of peace. I find this to be the difference between a passionate, angry young man and a wiser adult. I think by 30, most of us have someone that they used to be under the lock and key of wisdom and experience. Kenshin fears the part of himself he keeps locked away. The losses he could incur from letting that man out are real and heavy. The narrative of Rurouni Kenshin is one of personal growth, dealing with the losses of the past, sticking to promises you make for the future, and coming to terms with the negative parts of yourself that don't simply go away. It's no coincidence that Kenshin's blade is turned inward. The Sakabato protects the attacker but is dangerous to the wielder, and Kenshin's main battle is within. With aid of his new friends, Kenshin first proceeds to protect the government and New Japan he helped create, and then redeem himself for his past mistakes. The fights on the outside are a mirror of his internal struggles. For example, Shishio was Kenshin's successor, a genius swordsman worthy of the title Manslayer. However, this ruthless man was burned beyond recognition and now physically represents the ugliness of Kenshin's past. Shishio's defeat at his own hands shows the way that hatred can burn you from the inside out. It's all a carefully conscripted lesson for the man with the reverse blade. There's always been something special about this story, something that made it more than it is, a simple period piece about a man seeking redemption. The manga is beautiful, well written, drawn, and paced. It even helped Eiichiro Oda into Shonen Jump at the age of 19, who then went on to create the masterwork known as One Piece. Kenshin was the first manga I read which shone a light on its creator, Nobuhiro Watsuki, in the end pages where he would talk about his work. I felt connected to the man at the time. I appreciated his revelation of his work process and his communication with his audience. That is the inspiration for our informative pinned comments we post below every video as a bit of a diary here on this channel. But as many of you know, there is a dark side to this that comes from Nobuhiro Watsuki. In 2017, the man who created this beautiful story was caught with explicit videographic material of adolescent females, aka CP. You know what I mean. I will be referring to this as cheese pizza because YouTube. I'm not an apologist. Cheese pizza is wrong in my opinion. However, there is some cultural context that is extremely valid in this discussion. It's important to remember that Japan is Japan, not America. It's not like America or anywhere else. It has a unique culture and history that is different from ours in many ways, including its religious foundations, which are a cornerstone of societal building. Many Western territories are Christian or biblically based. Our views on relations between two people are heavily influenced by the teachings of that book. Even for those of us who are not religious, it's ingrained in our social structure. Now, unlike America, creating cheese pizza was legal in Japan until 1999. Their national age of consent is 13. This doesn't mean it's 13 in every province of Japan. In many places like Tokyo, it's as high as 18. Where I live in America, it's 16. The laws are provincial, and the punishments for breaking those laws are different for men and women. Now, even after outlawing the creation of cheese pizza, possession of those images or videos was legal until 2014. Possessors of cheese pizza were given a 1-year grace period to dispose of their smut, and if caught after mid-June 2015, the offender was subject to a year in jail and fines up to $10,000 USD. Watsuki-san did not throw out his cheese pizza and was caught with some pie decked with under 15-year-old female toppings in his house and office. He was quoted by the Popo as saying, "I liked girls from the upper grades of elementary school to around the second year of junior high school." Yucky, dude. His current manga, Rurouni Kenshin Hokkaido Arc, was put on hiatus. He was publicly shamed and fined about $1,870 USD, which is a pretty light slap on the wrist in the eyes of myself as an American. I can't forget my filters or biases. It's important to note that he has never been accused of trespassing on a minor. The man is married and has been for a long time, and that in the eyes of the Japanese, he's paid for his crimes. In June, Hokkaido Arc started back up. So here's the big question, and I think it applies to both Kenshin and the man who wrote him. What is the line that makes people good or bad, or is there one at all? How do we differentiate between a good person doing bad things and a bad person doing good things? What does it take to redeem yourself? Can a bad person become good? Can good people become bad? Is it permanent or a phase? Kenshin was a murderer, a killer, a widowmaker. He did it in order to set up a government based on ideals with no guarantee of success after 200 years of peace. His actions in the line of duty he chose ruined the lives of so many people who were also simply trying to do what they thought was right. History often decides what's right and wrong in the end, and the acts of Kenshin will never outweigh the acts of Battousai the Manslayer in the eye of the public. But to the audience who travels with Kenshin along his path to redemption, we get an intimate look at what it's like to make amends. So is he a bad man who's trying to do good? Could a bad man do good? And what makes a man truly bad? And what about Watsuki-san? The man is a pervert. He made his apologies, his crime was paid for in the eyes of the law and his people. He spent the last 30 years of his life making people happy and creating art for the world to enjoy. Art that in no way promotes his perversions. Granted, he spent some of the cash he made off of that art on cheese pizza in the interim, but he wrote Rurouni Kenshin. That's not excusing him. The point is the man understands the intricacies of redemption. Having walked that journey through not only a television show, but books as well, it's hard for me to imagine the man who created that not feeling guilty, conflicted, even wrong for his perverse tastes. Perhaps part of him is within Kenshin. Maybe it's not a coincidence that his best work is a redemption story. Doesn't make his actions okay, but what is he? Is he a bad man who did good things, or a good man who did bad things? What makes a person irredeemably bad? It's not my job to give you that answer. I can't give you that answer. I can pose the question for you to discover it yourself. The publisher, Jump Square, left us with this in perfect English. The author, Watsuki, spends his days reflecting and with remorse, and think as though it's our obligation as a publisher as well as his as an author, make a way for us to reply through the work to the various opinions we've been getting. And so, from the July issue, which goes on sale June 4th, serialization will resume. Viz has not published the work in America to my knowledge. In the case of Kenshin, I think the line is easier to draw by justifying his actions with war. Obviously, it's okay to kill in a war, right? It wasn't his fault or anything, it's war. But is that just Western ideology? Or is it because we know Kenshin? Because we walk his path and we see inside his head. We suffer along with him on his road to redemption. We understand Kenshin. We're familiar with him. Is it the familiarity that sways our hearts to forgiveness rather than rationalism? Again, I'll leave that for you to decide. I feel secure in recommending this story to you. And while I love the anime and it's an absolute classic, I do recommend reading the original manga above it. It's a beautiful piece of art and an amazing read start to finish. I'm not asking you to support the man behind the work. I'm not telling you what you should do, but you know, you could always hoist that pirate flag, set sail on the internet ocean to pillage and plunder for some manga. But regardless, you tell me, is it art or is it the artist? For me, it's just Rurouni Kenshin, and I'd really like to cover it again someday. Hey everybody, what's up? Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. This was a little bit of a new thing for us. Generally, we don't go so deep into history, but it's something that I would really like to do in the future. Japanese history is kind of one of the things that I'm really passionate about. It's really fun to research, and I enjoy talking about it and teaching you guys. So if you liked that, definitely let us know and we will do some more. We definitely wanted to do some of that in our Demon Slayer video that we did back a little while ago, but we cut it down quite a bit because we were worried about audience retention, because that's a YouTube thing. Anyway, I have some awesome announcements for you guys. In September, on the 28th and 29th, I will be at Retro World Expo in Hartford. That is a video game convention. I will have some panels. It's a really fun little convention, and I hope you come down and see me. And then on November 2nd and 3rd, I will be in Atlantic City at J1 Con, and that will be our very first anime convention as Bonsai Pop. It's gonna be really awesome. We got some panels down there too. It's right in a casino. Passes are super cheap, so check that out. J1 Con, it's just J and 1. And I hope you come and see me. Definitely pick up your tickets. Other than that, it's been a crazy summer, just full of conventions and lots of traveling. I'm sorry that it took 2 weeks to get this video out, but we wanted to make sure that we did as good a job as we possibly could. And since it was Kenshin, it was so important to me, I really wanted to make sure that I did it justice. So hopefully I did. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I mean, you're still here. You must have liked something. But on to our ultimate lucky patron of the week. This week, it is Glad. Thank you so much, Glad, for your continued support. You're always active in our exclusive Patreon Discord. But we will have new stuff for you there very, very soon, I promise. Live shows, all sorts of stuff. It's gonna be great. So I think it's time to finally wrap things up. My name is Mike. Thank you for watching Bonsai Pop. Next week, we're going to be doing a video with Grant, Story You Never Knew, on Dr. Stone. So get hype, and we will see you then. Thanks.